The official version crumbles as soon as you examine the numbers. We are shown the Romanovs as a great dynasty that elevated the empire. But just open the family tree, and instead of grandeur, you will see a chain of sickly heirs. Why does official history call it coincidence? Why are we asked to believe in poor medicine when the disease strikes selectively along the male line? And why does such a dynasty suddenly receive the country after the catastrophe of the time of troubles? We are told the story of a legitimate ascension to the throne, but the facts increasingly resemble a tale of replacement. And the main question here is not who sat on the throne, but rather who put them there and why. The powerful Romanov dynasty. 300 years of reign. The grandeur of the empire. But open the family tree, and you'll see not grandeur, but a biological catastrophe. Take the family tree of Alexei Mikhailovich. 16 children. 13 from the first wife, Miloslavskaya, 3 from the second, Naryshkina. Now count. How many of the sons were healthy? Fyodor Alexeyevich, pockmarked, weak. He passed away at 20. Ivan Alexeyevich, feeble-minded, almost blind, epileptic, incapable of ruling. Peter Alexeyevich, convulsions throughout his life, fits of rage that he could not control. Alexei, Simeon, Dmitri, infants. They left this world before reaching a year. 0. 0 healthy boys among them all. This is not an illness. This is a statistical anomaly. The most obvious explanation is that the medicine was poor, everyone was sick, and child mortality was high. But then, why were all the daughters of the same parents healthy? Sofia Alexeyevna, healthy, active, capable of ruling. Evdokia, Marfa, Tatiana, they all lived to old age. They had no syphilis, no epilepsy, no convulsions. Genetics does not operate selectively by gender. If the cause were unsanitary conditions or epidemics, all children would be affected, boys and girls equally. But only men are sick. It's not external conditions, it's blood. Look at the specific figures regarding the growth of children from that era. In the 17th century, court physicians kept records. A healthy boy should weigh at least 20 kilograms by the age of 10. Fyodor Alexeyevich weighed 12 at 10 years old. Ivan Alexeyevich could not walk without support until he was 15. This is not just an illness, it is a physical underdevelopment. Look. In the 17th century, they were aware of hereditary diseases. Noble families did not marry their daughters off to the sick. Dynastic marriages were approved by doctors. A physical examination was a mandatory procedure before the wedding. And here is the paradox. The Romanovs were related to the strongest European houses. The Miloslavskis were a healthy lineage. The Naryshkins were too. So where did the sick offspring come from? Look wider. It's not just Alexei Mikhailovich. Consider Mikhail Fyodorovich, the first Romanov. Of his children, 3 out of 10 survived. 7 died in infancy. Take Peter the Great. His son, Alexei Petrovich, perished in prison. All his other children did not live to adulthood, except for 2 daughters. The dynasty degenerates from the first generation. Not after 100 years, not after 5 generations, right away. It's not a disease, It's a biological incompatibility. As if the Romanov dynasty is genetically incompatible with something. With the territory? With the climate? Or with the buildings they occupied? But if the problem lies in genetics, where did the dynasty come from in the first place? And most importantly, why did they urgently occupy those palaces that were clearly not built for them? Open any photo album of the Moscow Kremlin, the Tarim Palace, where the princesses lived. Look up. The ceilings soar to a height of 5, at some points 6 meters. The doors are such that an average height adult woman cannot reach the upper door frame, even when standing on tiptoe. The door handles are positioned at the level where a modern person has their chest or even chin. Windows begin where the height of ordinary rooms ends, at 3 or 4 meters off the floor. To look out of such a window, you need a ladder, or a height of 3 meters. Compare this to the height of people in the 17th century. The average height of a man was 165 centimeters. For women, it was 155. Now imagine a woman 1.5 meters tall in a room with a 6-meter ceiling. She looks like a child in a world of adults. Walk through any old palace. Count the steps. The height of one step is 40 centimeters. The modern standard is 15, at most 20 centimeters. Try climbing a staircase with steps 40 centimeters high. You won't walk, you'll scramble, like a child on adult furniture. Who were these steps built for? Architecture is always functional. Door handles are placed at hand height. Windows start where it's convenient to look out. Ceilings are designed with the height of the inhabitants in mind, plus some extra. If the ceiling is 6 meters high, it means the inhabitants' height was at least 2.5, if not 3 meters. At first glance, it seems that high ceilings are merely a tradition, a symbol of grandeur. And that sounds logical. Until you look at the door handles placed at modern waist height. Until you see the windows that start 3 meters off the ground. To look out the window of the Tarim Palace, you need a ladder. This is not symbolism. This building was not constructed for people who are 150 to 160 centimeters tall. In the 17th century, there was no surplus of materials. Every meter of wall consists of thousands of bricks, firing, and transportation. No one builds ceilings 3 meters higher than necessary for the sake of beauty. It is economically absurd. Materials were expensive. Labor was expensive. Why waste twice the resources on unnecessary height? The Romanovs did not build these palaces. They occupied them. They took over already completed buildings, constructed by a civilization whose growth significantly surpassed that of humanity. Officially, this is explained as the style of the era. But in this version, geography does not add up. Why do we see the same style in Europe and Asia? Why does it synchronously disappear in the late 18th century? Why, after that, do they build houses with ceilings 2.5 meters high? Normal, human heights. The Romanov dynasty does not physically correspond to the buildings in which it resides. But where did these buildings come from? And where have those who built them gone? The Romanov dynasty ascended to the throne in 1613. That is official. Now take a look at the maps. Open any European map from the 16th century. In the territory of Muscovy, you will see the inscription Tartary, Great Tartary, an empire that stretches from the Urals to the Pacific Ocean. Now, Open a map from the 17th century. Tartary is no more. Instead, there is Muscovy under the Romanovs. Empires do not disappear in 10 years. To erase a state the size of a continent from the map, a catastrophe of planetary scale is needed. Historians claim that Tartary is simply a geographical name and not a state. All right, let's assume that's true. Then why are cities, roads, and borders depicted on the same maps? Why do European travelers describe encounters with Tartar ambassadors? Why are symbols of statehood depicted on coats of arms? Tartaria vanishes. The Romanovs emerge. The time frame is 20 to 30 years. This is not a conquest. It is the settling of void. Look at the early years of Mikhail Romanov's rule. The treasury is empty. There is no army. The roads are destroyed. Cities are buried in mud. The so-called cultural layer after just one generation. This is not a description of ascension. This is a description of survival after a catastrophe. And this is not only happening in Russia. During the same period, the early 17th century, civil wars, epidemics, and years of famine are occurring throughout Europe, Asia, and America. But take a look at the timeline. All these events fall within the span of the years 1610 to 1650. Too synchronous. These are not wars. This is a cleansing. A global catastrophe is annihilating the former civilization. Cities are buried in mud. Roads are vanishing. And new dynasties, the Romanovs, Bourbons, Stuarts, are coming to inhabit the deserted palaces. But where did the new rulers come from? Why do they all appear simultaneously? And most importantly, why is their genetics so weak that dynasties deteriorate within 2 generations? The tower system of the 17th century is not a tradition, it's a quarantine. Read the description of the lives of the princesses by the historian Ustrialov. No outsider's gaze ever penetrated their chambers. Doctors were invited only in case of severe illness, and they were not allowed to see the face of the patient. The princesses would go to church through hidden passages. If they were to go anywhere, it would be in closed carriages with covered windows. The people knew them only by name from the church proclamations, but no one had seen their faces. No one had heard their voices. Why? In Europe, princesses attend balls, dance, and receive ambassadors. In Muscovy, they sit behind bars. Now many will write Eastern traditions. Well, fine. Then answer this. Muscovy is not the Ottoman Empire. Where did this sudden Eastern custom come from? Look at the logic. The princess is the daughter of a ruler, a potential bride for European princes, a dynastic commodity. In Europe, they showcase such girls. Meetings are arranged. Suitors come, look, and assess. In Moscovia, it's the opposite. They hide. The story with Valdemar is a vivid example. The groom and bride spend a year and a half in the same city. Not a single meeting. Not even through a grate. Not even through a veil. This is not a matter of decorum. It is a prohibition on displaying. Why the ban? Because if the princess is shown, the discrepancy will become evident. Imagine the scene. A European ambassador arrives at the Tarim Palace. He is escorted through corridors with 6-meter-high ceilings, upstairs with steps that are 40 centimeters high, through doors with their upper frames standing 3 meters high. The ambassador enters the hall. The hall is enormous. The ceiling soars high above. The windows begin at a height of 3 meters. And in the center of the hall stands a woman 1.5 meters tall. She gets lost in this space, like a child in an adult world, like a stranger in a foreign home. The ambassador sees. The ambassador understands. These buildings were not built for these people. That's why they weren't shown. That's why the towers. That's why the covered carts. That's why the curtains on the windows. The princesses were hidden not for the sake of traditions. They were hidden because their incongruity with the architecture revealed the truth. A woman 1.5 meters tall in a hall with 6-meter ceilings is visual evidence that the new dynasty are usurpers in foreign palaces. The towers became a cage, a way to conceal the physical mismatch between the new rulers and the buildings they had appropriated. And here's the paradox. Sophia is brought out. All the rules are broken. She is shown to the people. She receives ambassadors, engages in negotiations, appears in public. Why have the rules suddenly changed? Because there was no choice. The dynasty is on the brink of extinction. All the men are ill. A ruler is needed. And the ruler must be visible, must make decisions, must represent power. Sophia is the only healthy one, the only capable one. She was taken out of the cage, not out of progressiveness, out of despair. If you think that Sophia was just ambitious and wanted power for herself, then why was she educated? Why was she given Latin, politics, and maps, contrary to all the traditions of the Tarems? In the 17th century, the education of a Tsarevna was a scandal. The church forbade women from reading books except for the canonical hours. But Sophia knows Latin. She negotiates with European ambassadors. She understands maps, politics, and diplomacy. This is not a coincidence. This is preparation. Look at her library. In the inventory of Sophia's possessions after her overthrow, books in Latin, Greek, and Polish are listed. Treatises on geography, maps of Europe and Asia, correspondence with European courts. A typical Tsarevna did not have such a collection. A typical Tsarevna had only one book, a prayer book. Who gave her access to this knowledge? Who took the risk of teaching her against tradition? The old boyar nobility. Those who still remembered the times before the Romanovs. Those who saw that the dynasty was dying out. They needed a backup option, and that option became Sophia. The year 1682. Tsar Fyodor departs this life. Ill, weak, unable to continue the lineage. The next heir is Ivan, a blind epileptic who cannot dress himself. Peter is a 10-year-old child. The dynasty on the brink of extinction. And then they bring out Sophia. But they do not just bring them out. The Strelets rebellion. Sudden, brutal, organized. The Strelets burst into the Kremlin. They demand the handover of the boyars from the Narishkin clan, relatives of the underage Peter. They throw them out of the windows onto spears. A bloody massacre. And then a demand. 2 kings, Ivan and Peter. And above them, the regent, Sophia. Too convenient, too timely, too clean in the outcome. Sophia was not prepared out of a love for knowledge. She was prepared as a backup option. When all the men of the dynasty proved incapable of ruling, a woman was needed. Sophia was not a choice. She was a necessity. Against the backdrop of her ailing brothers, she looked like a giantess among dwarfs, not only physically, but also intellectually. What is happening with the Romanov dynasty? Why is the male line deteriorating already in the first generation after coming to power? Perhaps that's why Sophia was taken out of the tower, not out of progressiveness, but out of desperation. When all the legitimate heirs are ill, when the dynasty is facing its end, one has to break the rules. But who made the decision to remove her? Who was behind the Streltsy uprisings that coincidentally elevated her to power? And why was she removed in exactly the same way 7 years later? Vasily Golitsyn, prince, favorite of Sophia, commander of the Crimean campaigns, a man who spoke Latin like a European aristocrat, who was interested not in Russian affairs, but in European revolutions. One of the European envoys described the meeting with Golitsyn as follows: "I felt as if I were at the court of some Italian prince. The conversation was in Latin about everything that was significant at that time in Europe. Latin, the language of European diplomacy, the language of scholarship, the language of confidential negotiations. Golitsyn speaks it fluently, not through a translator, directly, as if it were his own. What is the conversation about? Moscow affairs? Domestic politics? No. Golitsyn is asking the envoy about the European wars, about how the emperor is fighting against France, and especially about the English Revolution. The year is 1688. A revolution takes place in England. King James II Stuart is overthrown. William of Orange lands with a Dutch expeditionary force and takes the throne. No civil war, no large-scale battles, just a surgical operation. The old king is removed, and the new one is installed. Golitsyn wants to know the details. How did it happen? How was the change of power technically carried out? What forces were involved? Who funded it? Who was in command? This is not idle curiosity. It is a professional interest. Golitsyn studies the technology of coups. But what Golitsyn did with this knowledge in practice is evident from the Crimean campaigns. More on that later. First, another detail. The year 1644. Count Valdemar of Schleswig-Holstein arrives in Moscow to propose to Princess Irina Mikhailovna. He lives in the capital for a year and a half. For a year and a half, the groom and the bride are in the same city, and they don't see each other even once. The wedding did not take place. The count left empty-handed. And now open the history textbook. The year is 1762. On the Russian throne is Peter III. Full name, Karl Peter Ulrich von Schleswig-Holstein-Gottorp. 118 years. 3 generations. Valdemar did not receive Irina, but his descendants inherited the empire. Follow the chain. Valdemar Schleswig-Holstein proposes to Irina Mikhailovna in 1644. Rejection. He leaves empty-handed. It seems to be the end of the story. But look further. His nephew, Karl Friedrich Schleswig-Holstein-Gottorp, marries Anna Petrovna, the daughter of Peter the Great. The year is 1725. 80 years have passed since Valdemar's refusal. But the Holsteiners did not give up. From this marriage, a boy is born, Karl Peter Ulrich. His mother passes away when he is 3 months old. His father dies when he is 11. The boy becomes an orphan. And suddenly, Empress Elizabeth Petrovna, daughter of Peter the Great, the boy's aunt, declares him the heir to the Russian throne. 1762. A boy becomes Peter III. Schleswig-Holstein on the Russian throne. 118 years after the unsuccessful courtship. Coincidence? Or a plan stretched over centuries? It is commonly accepted that these were simply dynastic marriages, as was the custom. Fine. Then explain why, after the failed match with Schleswig-Holstein, they didn't give up. Why did they systematically penetrate into Russia through Anna Ioannovna, through Elizabeth, through Catherine? European elites are not in a hurry. They plan for centuries. One defeat is not a problem. They are playing the long game. Sooner or later, their blood will find its way to foreign thrones. Look at the context of Golitsyn's campaigns in Crimea. The year is 1686, the Eternal Peace Treaty with Poland. Russia joins the Holy League, a military alliance against the Ottoman Empire. The Holy League. The Pope blesses, the Habsburgs lead, Poland participates, Venice participates, and suddenly, Russia. Muscovy, which had stood apart from European affairs for centuries, is suddenly drawn into the war on the side of the West. Why? An eternal peace with Poland. Russia renounces its territorial claims. It acknowledges Kiev as a sacred city, the cradle of Russian Orthodoxy, belonging to Poland. In return, an alliance against the Turks. Sophia is signing this contract. Or is she being forced to sign it? The commitment is to fight against Crimea. The Crimean Khanate is a vassal of the Ottoman Empire. If Russia wants to be in the Holy League, it must strike at Crimea. From the east, to divert Turkish forces from the Habsburgs. And this is exactly what Europe did not forgive. Golitsyn failed both campaigns. Crimea held out. Sophia was removed from power. Golitsyn was exiled to Pustozersk. Peter came to power. And what does Peter do? The Azov campaigns. The year 1695. The year 1696. The goal is Azov, a Turkish fortress on the Don, the key to the Black Sea. The first campaign was a failure. The fortress was not taken. But Peter does not retreat. He builds a fleet. He returns. The second campaign is a success. Azov is captured. The contrast with Golitsyn is obvious. Golitsyn commands armies of hundreds of thousands and achieves nothing. Peter, with smaller forces, captures the fortress. Because Peter is fulfilling the task, and Golitsyn may have sabotaged it. This is what determined Sophia's fate. Look at the chain. The Habsburgs are related to the Holsteiners. The Holsteiners are related to the Oldenburgs. The Oldenburgs are related to the Romanovs. All European houses are genetically connected. This is not romance. This is a tool of control. When you are a relative of all the rulers, you control all the thrones. Dynastic marriages are not about love. They are about power. One unsuccessful marriage? No problem. We'll try through the daughter. Didn't work? We'll try through the granddaughter. Sooner or later, our blood will run in their veins. Sophia found herself in this system. The eternal peace with Poland from the year 1686 is not her choice. It's a deal imposed by the European elites. Look at the conditions. Russia renounces Kiev, the holy city, the cradle of Russian Orthodoxy. A city that was part of Muscovia is being handed over to Poland. Forever. Eternal peace means no right of revision. In exchange, what? An alliance against the Turks. Russia commits to fighting Crimea, distracting the forces of the Ottoman Empire, assisting the Habsburgs on the Western Front. Sophia signs, or she is forced to sign, because the alternative is war with Poland and isolation from Europe, and the dynasty is on the brink of extinction. Allies are needed. Support is essential. But look at the results. Golitsyn's campaigns in Crimea were a failure. Twice. 100,000 men, 200,000 horses, huge resources. Zero result. Coincidence? Or intentional sabotage? Perhaps Sophia understood. She understood that involving Russia in European wars would mean the end of its last connections with the South, with those lands where traces of the old world still lingered. Thus she gave Golitsyn a secret instruction, to formally carry out the order, but in fact to achieve no result. European courts quickly understood. The first failure can be attributed to difficulties. The second failure is suspicious. When it became clear that Sophia was playing a double game, she was removed. The Streltsy uprising of 1689. Too swift, too effective. Sophia is removed. Golitsyn is exiled. Peter comes to power. And then, the Northern War. 21 years of war with Sweden. For what? For access to the Baltic. For a window to Europe. Russia finally turns westward. Connections with the East are severed. Sophia tried to resist. She tried to maintain her balance. But she lost. Because she was playing against a system that plans generations ahead. And this is not just Russia. The same mechanism operates throughout Europe. Look at England. The Hanoverian dynasty is German. Spain has the Bourbons, who are French. Austria has the Habsburgs. All the thrones of Europe are in the hands of 3 or 4 families, and they all operate according to the same scheme. They do not fight each other. They manage the wars. War of the Spanish Succession, 1700–1713. Charles II of Spain passes away without an heir, the last of the Spanish Habsburgs. Who will take the throne? War engulfs all of Europe. France against Austria, England against France, Spain, the battlefield. Millions perish. Cities are destroyed. The economy is shattered. The result? The Bourbons on the Spanish throne. The Habsburgs receive compensation in Italy and the Netherlands. England strengthens its position at sea. Everything is divided. Everyone is satisfied. This is not a war of dynasties. It is a redistribution of the world masked by dynastic conflict. The War of the Austrian Succession. From 1740 to 1748. Charles VI of Habsburg passes away. The heiress is his daughter, Maria Theresa. A woman. According to Salic law, women cannot inherit. But Maria Theresa inherits. War breaks out. Prussia, France, Bavaria against Austria. England and Russia support Austria. Once again, millions perish. The result? Maria Theresa remains on the throne. Prussia gains Silesia. France receives territories in the Netherlands. Everything is divided. The Habsburg dynasty is preserved. Look at the pattern. Every time, a dynastic crisis. Every time, war. Every time, a redrawing of borders. But the dynasties remain. The same families, the same connections, the same control. The Romanovs were a part of this system. They did not build the empire, they inherited it. After the catastrophe, when the previous inhabitants vanished, when the palaces stood empty, when the lands became deserted. They were brought in by the European elites. They were installed to rule, controlled through dynastic marriages. And when the Romanovs tried to play their own game, they were replaced. Sophia tried. They removed her. Peter III tried. He was overthrown. Paul I tried. He was killed. Nicholas II tried to maintain autonomy. They executed the entire family. The dynasty of sickly boys perished in 1917, but it had been dying off from the very beginning, since 1613, from the moment they were placed on the throne of the empty country. 300 years of slow agony. 300 years of trying to survive in a world that was not built for them, in buildings that they did not erect, among a population that came from who knows where. Alexei Nikolaevich, the last Tsarevich, 13 years old, hemophilia, shot in the basement of the Ipatiev house. A dynasty that began with sick boys ended with a sick boy. The circle is closed. But the question remains, who drew it? To understand this, we need to go back to the beginning, to the moment when the control system first failed, to Sophia. And who eliminated her? The one who was trained in Europe. 1697. The Great Embassy. Peter is going to Europe to learn shipbuilding. The question is, who is he going to see? William of Orange, ruler of the Netherlands, King of England, the man who 9 years ago executed the perfect coup. He landed with his troops, overthrew the legitimate King James II Stuart, took the throne, and hardly spilled a drop of blood. No civil war, no long sieges, just a surgical replacement of one ruler with another. Look at the details of that coup. November 1688. William lands in England with an army of 14,000 men. James II flees the country. Parliament declares the throne vacant. William is crowned. Everything took 3 months. Without war, without sieges, without mass executions. The technology is clean, efficient, fast. And so Peter is going to study with this person. What do such people teach? Turning? Or the technologies of seizing power? Peter spends several weeks with Wilhelm. Conversations, feasts, exchange of experiences. Wilhelm shows him the fleet, the shipyards, the arsenals, but most importantly, he shows him how to govern a state where half the population hates the new power. England is restless after the coup. The Jacobites, supporters of the overthrown James, are rising in rebellion. William is crushing them, harshly, without mercy, swiftly. Peter looks. He learns. He remembers. In school, we were taught that Peter traveled to learn about science and progress. That's fine, but then why is the first thing he does upon returning executes thousands of Streltsy? 1698. The Streletsky revolt is suppressed. 2,000 people are dead. The old military elite is annihilated. The boyars are forced to shave their beards, wear European clothing, and abandon traditions. The capital is moved to St. Petersburg, a new city, without roots, without memory. 2,000. Remember this number. But this is only those executed publicly. Look at the methods. Gallows are being erected right in Red Square. Hundreds of gallows. Soldiers are hanged by the dozens. Some are quartered. Some are put to the wheel. Some are burned alive. Peter is personally present at the executions. They say he even participates. This is not the suppression of a rebellion. This is the eradication of memory. The Streltsy are not just a military force. They are the last warriors of old Muscovy. those who still remembered the times before the Romanovs, those who supported Sofia, those who knew that in those gigantic palaces other people once lived, taller, more powerful. They were not destroyed for the rebellion. They were destroyed as bearers of memory. And next comes the methodical cleanup. The Streltsy families are exiled to Siberia. Children are separated from their parents. Property is confiscated. The Streltsy regiments are disbanded. In their place, new troops are formed, trained in the European manner. Officers are foreigners. Soldiers are recruits without a past. Look at Peter's methods. He doesn't fight with the boyars. He reprograms them. He forces them to dress like Europeans, to speak French, to adopt Western manners. Beards are forcibly shaved off. Traditional clothing is banned. There's a fine for wearing a caftan. There's a tax for having a beard. Assemblies are introduced. Mandatory balls where the nobles must dance European dances, drink coffee, and smoke tobacco. Those who refuse will be punished. Those who resist will be exiled. This is not a cultural exchange. It is the erasure of identity. Peter did not reform Russia. He completed the purge. He annihilated the remnants of the old world, using the same method that William of Orange applied in England. Quickly, harshly, without compromises. The old elite was destroyed. The new one was imported from Europe. But why was such a harsh purge necessary? What was so dangerous in the old world? And most importantly, where did the population go? Open the demographic data of Europe. The year 1650. Cities are half empty. Villages are abandoned. The year 1750. A demographic explosion. Where did the people come from? Take a specific example. St. Petersburg. 1703 year. An empty swamp. 1750 year. 75,000 residents. 1800 year. 220,000. Where did they come from? A woman gives birth to one child every 2 years. The survival rate in the 18th century was 50%. For the population to grow 100-fold in 50 years, each woman would need to give birth to 20 children, and all of them would have to survive. It is biologically impossible. Calculate it yourself. Take the initial population of St. Petersburg. Let's say 1,000 people in the year 1710. 500 women of childbearing age. Each gives birth every 2 years. That's 250 children a year. Of these, half survive, 125. In 10 years, 1,250 additional residents. Along with the initial population, 2,250. In 20 years, 4,000. In 30, 8,000. In 50 years, a maximum of 30,000 under ideal conditions. But in the year 1750, there are 75,000 of them. Where do the extra 45,000 come from? The usual explanation is that migrants arrived and settled the lands. Fine. Then where are the documents about the resettlement? Where are the lists? Where are the roads that millions of people traveled? Where are the inns that fed the travelers? Where are the hospitals that treated the sick on the journey? There are no roads. There are no lists. But there are people. The censuses record them as a fact, without a history of origin. Take another example. Moscow. The year 1650. Estimates range from 20 to 30,000 inhabitants. The year 1800. 200,000. A growth of 7 times in 1.5 centuries. With natural population growth? Impossible. London, 1650, 350,000. 1800, 1 million, an increase of almost 3 times. Paris, 1650, 400,000. 1800, over 600,000. Vienna, 1700, 100,000. 1800, 230,000. All major cities in Europe are growing at the same rate. The numbers do not align with the biological norm for any of them. Look at the surnames: Smith, Miller, Kuznetsov, Plotnikov, Melnikov. In the mid-19th century, millions of people received surnames derived from professions. Why all of a sudden? Because these are not surnames. They are inventory labels. If you're a blacksmith, you'll be Kuznetsov. If you're a miller, you'll be Melnikov. This is not about family. It's a functional designation in the new system. And this is not just in Russia. In America, there were orphan trains. 250,000 children without parents. From 1854 to 1929. Where did they come from in such large numbers? Where are their parents? There was no war. There were no plagues either. Why do historical chronicles remain silent about the mass deaths of the adult population that could explain such a number of orphans? These children appeared out of nowhere. They filled the shelters. They were loaded onto trains and sent to develop the unoccupied territories. New farmers, new workers for the factories, new soldiers. Look at the system. The shelter announces, there are children, families are needed. The train sets off for the Midwest. It stops in small towns. Children are brought out onto the platform. Locals choose whom to take in, like cattle at a fair. Children are taken to farms, without documents, without birth certificates, often even without names. They are given new names, new surnames, a new past, perfect little cogs for the new system, perfect citizens of the new world built on the ruins of the old. And the strangest thing is, these children are healthy, strong, capable of work. Where do so many healthy children come from in an era when child mortality rates are skyrocketing? In Europe, shelters are overcrowded. Hundreds of thousands of children without families. London, Paris, Berlin, in every city, shelters with thousands of places. Where do so many orphans come from if there hasn't been a mass death of parents? In Russia, serfdom was abolished in 1861. Suddenly, millions of free peasants appeared. 23 million emancipated serfs. Where did they come from? Who gave birth to them? Where are the documents for these people from the previous 100 years? This is not natural growth. It is a replacement of the population. After the catastrophe, the old world has been destroyed. The new world is being populated by new people, without a past, without memory. But if the population was replaced, the same could have been done with the ruling dynasty. Let's take a look at the numbers. Compare with other dynasties of the same period. The Bourbons, similarly. The Habsburgs, degeneration, inbreeding. The Stuarts, illnesses, infertility. All the new dynasties that emerged after the catastrophe of the 17th century share one issue. They do not survive. Take the Habsburgs, Charles II of Spain, the last of the Spanish Habsburgs, born in 1661, passes away in 1700. 39 years of suffering. The lower jaw protrudes so much that he cannot chew. The tongue is so large that his speech is indistinct. epileptic seizures, infertility. He was unable to produce an heir. The dynasty of the Spanish Habsburgs died out with him. Take the Bourbons. Louis XV. He suffered from smallpox. Louis XVI. Executed in 1793. His son Louis XVII., a 10-year-old boy, passes away in prison in 1795. Officially, tuberculosis. The dynasty is interrupted. Take the Stuarts. James II, overthrown in 1688. His son, James Francis, a claimant to the throne, but he is childless. The dynasty is dying out. Natural evolution doesn't work that way. If a family is healthy, it produces healthy offspring. If it is ill, it dies out in 3 to 4 generations, not one. But the Romanovs are vanishing instantaneously. The first generation is still alive. The second is already suffering. The third does not come into being. The same goes for the Habsburgs, the same with the Bourbons, the same with the Stuarts. All the dynasties that came to power after the catastrophe of the 17th century are dying out according to the same pattern. This is not a coincidence, it's a pattern. The standard version is inbreeding, consanguineous marriages. But the Romanovs are related to dozens of European houses. The Miloslavskis, the Narishkins, the Lopukins, all different families. The blood is fresh, but the offspring are sickly. The Habsburgs did indeed practice close-kin marriages. But look at the timeline. Until the 17th century, they were healthy. Charles V, who ruled in the 16th century, was a mighty emperor. Philip II was a healthy ruler, but after the 17th century, degeneration set in. Charles II was a cripple. What has changed? The problem is not in incest. The problem lies in the blood itself, as if a flaw had been embedded in the genetics of the dynasty from the very beginning. Look at the medical records of court physicians. The 17th century is an era when European courts exchange medical knowledge. A French doctor at the Moscow court describes the condition of Tsarevich Ivan as an incurable damage to nature. A German doctor who treated Fyodor Alexeyevich writes in his diary, "The illness is not caused by air or food, but by the blood of the father." European courts were informed. The Austrian ambassador reports to the emperor in 1682. The Moscow dynasty is on the brink of extinction. The eldest Tsarevich is unfit for life. The middle one is feeble-minded. The youngest is a child. This is not a personal opinion. It is a medical conclusion based on the observations of court physicians sent from Europe. Most importantly, European dynasties are refusing to intermarry. When attempts were made to betroth the princess to the Swedish prince, negotiations reached a deadlock. The official reason was religion. The real reason was that the Swedes demanded a medical examination of the entire bride's family. The Romanovs refused. The wedding did not take place. The dynasty barely reproduces itself. Each generation is on the brink of extinction. Peter I is formally healthy, but he has convulsions. He cannot control his rage. He destroyed his own son, Alexei, tortured him in prison, with his own hands. It's not character, it's biology. It's a glitch in the emotion regulation system. It's damaged genetics. Alexei Petrovich is the son of Peter. Weak, sickly, fears his father, cannot meet expectations, attempts to escape abroad. Peter brings him back. tortures him. The son perishes in prison in 1718. He is 28 years old. Alexei had a son, Peter, the grandson of Peter the Great. He will become Peter II. He ascends to the throne at 11 years of age. He passes away at 14. Smallpox. The same illness that afflicted Fyodor Alexeyevich. The dynasty is dying out. Quickly. Unavoidably. The Romanovs are not a natural dynasty. They carry the same genetic markers as the population that emerged after the catastrophe of the 17th century. They were raised in conditions that could not ensure healthy offspring. Therefore, they degenerated. And this explains why Sophia is the only healthy one. She was a woman. The female body is more resilient to genetic disorders. 2 X chromosomes provide a safety margin. If one is damaged, the other compensates. Men do not have such a reserve. 1 X, 1 Y. If there is a mistake in the X chromosome, there is nothing to compensate for it. The disease manifests fully. That's why all the Romanov boys are sick. That's why all the daughters are healthy. It's not a coincidence. It's biology. Look at the female line of the Romanovs after Peter. Catherine I, the daughter of a Lithuanian peasant, becomes Peter's wife. Then, empress, reigns for 2 years, healthy. Anna Ioannovna, daughter of the ailing Ivan Alexeyevich. She herself is healthy, reigns for 10 years, lives to the age of 47. A long liver for the 18th century. Elizaveta Petrovna, daughter of Peter I, healthy, rules for 20 years, lives to the age of 52. Catherine II, a German princess, becomes empress, rules for 34 years, lives to the age of 67, healthy her entire life. And the men? Peter II, a sickly child, didn't live to see 15. Ivan VI, an infant emperor, overthrown, died in prison at 23. Peter III, weak health, overthrown, died at 34. Paul I, mental disturbances, killed at 46. Women rule for decades. Men die young. This is not a coincidence. It's genetics. Sophia was removed because there was no choice. But when she tried to play her game, she was taken out. The dynasty had to remain weak and controllable. And the women? Catherine II overthrows her own husband, Peter III. She becomes empress. She rules alone. No regents, no guardians. Why wasn't she removed like Sophia? Because Catherine did not attempt to preserve the old world. She continued Peter's work. Europeanization, Westernization, erasing the last traces. Under Catherine, what Peter began comes to an end. A school system modeled after the Prussian example. Uniformity, discipline, rote learning. Not education, programming. Millions of children without a past are uploaded into the operating system. They are given a language, basic skills, a false memory of a past they never had. Standardization of everything. A unified metric system. Uniform brick standards. a single width for railway tracks, a unified time with time zones. But the most terrifying thing is the standardization of people. The same form, the same textbooks, the same exams. A factory of obedient citizens who do not remember where they came from and do not ask uncomfortable questions. Portrait of Sophia, year 1700, 11 years after the overthrow. A crown on her head, a scepter in her right hand, a globe in her left. Who commissioned this portrait? Who took the risk? Look at the details. 2 pendants at the bottom, worn inscriptions. What was written there, and who erased it? Creating a portrait of the overthrown ruler adorned with imperial regalia in the year 1700 is deadly dangerous. Peter is in power. The Streltsy have been executed. Mention of Sophia is taboo. Yet the portrait exists. Take a closer look at the image. The double-headed eagle under the portrait. But this is not an ordinary Russian coat of arms. Above the heads of the bird are 3 crowns, rather than the 2 prescribed by Moscow tradition. On the wings of the eagle, there are 6 medallions with allegorical figures. Each one is inscribed: piety, virginity, mercy, justice, strength, meekness. In its claws, the predator holds a sword and a palm branch, ancient symbols of war and peace. Around the entire composition is a golden inscription: Sovereign of Great, Little, and White Russia. The full imperial title, the one that was held only by crowned individuals. Sophia was never officially crowned. She was a regent, a temporary ruler for her underage brothers. So why is there a crown in the portrait? Why the full title? Why the imperial regalia? Compare this portrait with the depiction of Leopold I, Emperor of the Holy Roman Empire. The same double-headed eagle, the same 3 crowns, the same medallions on the wings. Identical imperial symbolism. This is not a random coincidence. It is a visual statement. Sophia possessed legitimacy on the same level as the Emperor of Europe. And now, lower your gaze to the bottom of the portrait. There are 2 medallions placed there, empty. They once contained inscriptions. This is evident from the framing and the structure of the composition, but the texts themselves have been erased, physically destroyed. Who did this? When? And most importantly, what was written there that contradicted the new version of history so strongly that it required complete destruction? Perhaps it mentioned her true origins, or a connection to the vanished empire. Maybe it contained the date of her real coronation, or the name of the one who betrayed her. Someone might argue, this is just a historical artifact. But why wasn't it destroyed? Why does it hang in the Russian museum instead of being burned like thousands of other images of Sophia? The official website of the museum, under the portrait, states tersely, most of the images of Sophia were destroyed after her conspiracy was uncovered. But if they were destroyed, why was this portrait preserved? And why is it dated the year 700, 11 years after her overthrow, when she was already imprisoned in the Novodevichy convent? The portrait is a message from those who were on her side, from those who knew the truth. Sophia was legitimate. Sophia tried to preserve the old world, but she lost. The erased inscriptions scream the truth louder than any text. They say, here was information so dangerous that it had to be destroyed. Yet the portrait remains, as a reminder, as a mystery for future generations. Sophia is no exception. She is part of the pattern. Everyone who tried to resist the new order was exterminated. The musketeers, the old nobility, the memory of the previous civilization. Everything has been erased, across the world, synchronously, as if on command. Look at the chronology. 1688. William of Orange overthrows James II in England. 1689. Sophia is overthrown in Russia. The difference is 1 year. Too synchronous. The year 1698. The execution of the Streltsy in Moscow. During the same years, the suppression of the Jacobites in England. The same technology of cleansing. The beginning of the 18th century. Across Europe, archives are being burned. Monastic libraries, noble book repositories, old manuscripts, maps, chronicles. Everything that the old world remembers is being destroyed. The dynasty of sick boys is not a disease. It is a marker of degeneration, a marker that the new dynasty is foreign, that it has been brought in from outside, that it does not survive because it is not meant to. The Romanovs died out in 1917, officially executed in Yekaterinburg. Nicholas II, Alexandra Fyodorovna, 5 children, all shot in the basement of the Ipatiev house. But the dynasty was doomed from the very beginning. Its genetics were fated to fail. It could not survive in this world. Look at the last heir, Alexei Nikolaevich, the Tsarevich, the only son of Nicholas II. Hemophilia. His blood doesn't clot. Any scratch is a danger. Any bruise is a hematoma. Any injury could become fatal. This is the same genetic anomaly as that of his ancestors. Epilepsy, skin rashes, convulsions in some, hemophilia in the last one. Different symptoms, one cause. Damaged genetics. Alexei is 13 years old when he is executed in Yekaterinburg. 13. A dynasty that began with sickly boys ends with a sickly boy. It's not a curse, it's biology. It's the aftermath of a catastrophe whose consequences plagued the dynasty for 300 years. Because this world was not built for her. This world was built for those who came after the catastrophe, for the new people, for those who did not ask questions about the past, because they had no past. Gather all the threads together. Alexei Mikhailovich, 16 children, 0 healthy sons. All daughters are healthy. A genetic anomaly that cannot be explained by natural biology. Giant palaces with ceilings 6 meters high, doors with handles at chest height, windows 3 meters off the floor, steps 40 centimeters tall. Architecture built not for people who are 1.5, 160 centimeters tall. The Tarema system, isolation of the princesses, covered windows of the towers, prohibition to see their faces, not a tradition, quarantine, to conceal the mismatch between the new rulers and the buildings they have occupied. Tartaria on maps of the 16th century, an empire from the Urals to the Pacific Ocean. It disappears in the early 17th century. In its place, Muscovy under the Romanovs. The time span, 20 to 30 years. Not conquest, the settling of a void after a catastrophe. Sophia, the only healthy one among them all, educated against tradition, prepared as a backup option, elevated to power when all the men of the dynasty proved incapable of ruling, removed after 7 years when she tried to play her own game. The Streltsy uprisings, too timely, too organized. In 1682, Sophia is elevated. In 1689, she is removed. In 1698, the Streltsy are completely destroyed. Valdemar Schleswig-Holstein. The betrothal in 1644. Rejection. But 118 years later, his descendants on the Russian throne. Peter III. A dynastic game played across generations. William of Orange. The technology of a bloodless coup. James II was overthrown without war. William sits on the throne of England. Peter travels to learn from him. He returns and applies the same technology. Executions of the Streltsy, cleansing of the old elite, relocation of the capital, erasure of identity, demographic explosion. St. Petersburg. From a swamp to 200,000 residents in 100 years. Biologically impossible. Moscow, London, Paris, Vienna, all growing synchronously. Too quickly. People appear out of nowhere. Orphan trains. 250,000 children without parents. Shelters are overcrowded all over Europe. Where do so many orphans come from if there has not been a mass death of adults? Children without documents, without lineage. Perfect cogs for the new system. Surnames as inventory labels. Kuznetsov, Smith, Melnikov, Miller. Millions of people in the 19th century acquire surnames derived from professions, not family. Function. Romanovs, Bourbons, Habsburgs, Stuarts. All four are dying out according to the same scenario. The first generation lives, the second is ill, the third is not born. Portrait of Sophia, year 1700. Crown, scepter, orb, full imperial title. Two-headed eagle with 3 crowns. Identical to the symbolism of the Holy Roman Empire. Worn inscriptions in 2 medallions. Information that was erased, but the portrait remained. A message from those who knew the truth. The portrait was preserved, which means they wanted the questions to remain. All of this is real. The documents exist. Genealogical trees do not lie. Architecture cannot be faked. Maps are not rewritten retroactively. I do not claim to know the whole truth, but facts are a stubborn thing. The genetic anomaly of the Romanovs. The physical mismatch of the dynasty with architecture. The disappearance of an entire empire from maps. The synchronous emergence of new dynasties all over the world. A demographic explosion that cannot be explained by natural growth. Take any element of this chain separately, and you can find an explanation. Sick children? Poor healthcare. High ceilings? Tradition. The disappearance of Tartary? A geographical name. Demographic growth? Migration. But look at all the elements together. The picture changes. 16 children, 0 healthy sons. Buildings with 6-meter ceilings for people who are 1.5 meters tall. An empire the size of a continent disappears in 20 years. New dynasties emerge synchronously around the world. They all degenerate in 2 generations. Cities grow 100 times in 50 years. 250,000 children without parents. Millions of people receive surname functions instead of family names. Each fact can be explained individually. All the facts together cannot. This is not a theory. This is an investigation. The method is simple. We take the official version and check its compliance with physics, biology, logistics, and mathematics. The official version: the Romanov dynasty is the legitimate rulers who came to power during the time of troubles. Verification: why are all the boys sick? Why do they not match the sizes of the buildings they live in? Why do they appear right after the empire disappears from the maps? Official version: Sophia is a usurper, attempted to seize power. Inquiry: why were they formed against tradition? Why do the Streletsky riots occur at such opportune times? Why, in the portrait 11 years after the overthrow, are there imperial regalia? The official version: Peter is a great reformer. Check. Why is the first thing he does after training with William of Orange mass executions? Why are his methods identical to the technology of European coups? The official version: demographic growth is a natural process. Verification: how does a city's population grow 100 times over 50 years? Where do 250,000 orphans come from if there was no mass death of adults? Every question is met with silence by official history, or it provides an answer that cannot withstand scrutiny from mathematics and biology. What to do with this knowledge is up to you. You can close your eyes and continue believing in a convenient version, or you can start seeking further, asking questions and comparing dates and events. Truth does not lie on the surface. It is hidden in the details, in the discrepancies, in what people prefer not to discuss. Open the family tree of any European dynasty from the 17th to 18th century. Count how many boys survived, how many reached adulthood, how many produced healthy offspring. Open any album of photographs of old palaces. Measure the height of the ceilings, the height of the door handles, the height of the windows. Relate these measurements to the height of people from that time. Open the old maps of the 16th century. Locate Tartaria. Open the maps of the 17th century. Find the voids. Open the demographic data of any city in Europe. Calculate the growth rates. Check whether they correspond to biologically possible population growth. Open the archives of orphanages. Count the number of children without parents. Find an explanation of where they came from. Everything is accessible. Everything is verifiable. Everything is real. Look at history from a broader perspective, from different angles. Don't take anything at face value just because it's written in a textbook. Question it. Explore. Compare. The truth will reveal itself to you from the most unexpected places. In faded inscriptions on old portraits. In the height of the ceilings of ancient palaces. In strange coincidences that cease to be coincidences when you start to see the whole picture. The dynasty of sick boys is the key. The key to understanding what happened in the 17th and 18th centuries, a period that official history calls the Age of Enlightenment, a flourishing of culture and scientific revolution. But look at the facts. Dynasties decay. Cities are buried in dirt. Archives are burned. Maps are redrawn. Populations are replaced. Memory is erased. This is not the Enlightenment. This is a cleansing. Global. Synchronized. Systematic. Look at the synchronicity of events. The 17th century. The 1610s to the 1650s. The same processes are unfolding around the world, as if someone pressed the reset button. Europe. The 30 Years' War. From 1618 to 1648, a third of the population of Germany is lost. Cities are devastated. fields are abandoned. Then an unexpected recovery. New dynasties, new borders. The Peace of Westphalia in 1648 rewrites the map of Europe. England. Civil War, 1642 to 1651. King Charles I is executed. The Stuart dynasty is interrupted. Then, Restoration. Charles II returns to the throne in 1660. But the dynasty is already doomed. 28 years later, the Glorious Revolution of 1688. James II is overthrown. William of Orange takes the throne. The Stuarts will not return. France. The Fronde, 1648 to 1653. The nobility's uprisings against the young King Louis XIV. Paris is in chaos. Then, strengthening of the absolute monarchy. Louis becomes the Sun King. But his great-great-grandson, Louis XVI, will be executed. The dynasty is severed. Russia. The time of troubles, from 1605 to 1613. The Rurik dynasty is interrupted. Moscow is occupied by the Poles. Then comes the rise of the Romanovs. Mikhail Fedorovich is elected in 1613. A new dynasty, with the same genetic issue previously described. China. The fall of the Ming dynasty in 1664. The arrival of the Manchus. The Qing dynasty. New rulers. A new elite. Old China erased. The memory of the Mings obliterated. Temples are burned. Documents disappear. Japan. The Edo period begins in the year 1603. Tokugawa Ieyasu unifies the country after a century of wars. He closes the borders. He isolates Japan from the world for 250 years. Why? What are they hiding? India. The empire of the great Mughals. Flourishing during the reigns of Akbar and Shah Jahan in the late 16th to early 17th century. Then a decline. Aurangzeb, who ruled from 1658 to 1707, destroys religious tolerance. The empire is cracking. By the 18th century, disintegration. America. Spanish colonies. Officially, they conquer the Aztecs and Incas in the 16th century. But look at the chronology of construction. Most colonial cities are established in the 17th century. It is during this time that all the major cathedrals, forts, and administrative buildings emerge, as if nothing existed there before, or as if the old buildings were buried and they are building anew. All continents, all cultures, the same period, the same processes. Old dynasties fall, new ones rise. Cities are ravaged, then are repopulated. Archives burn, maps are redrawn, religions change, calendars are reformed, borders are reshaped. It's too synchronized to be a coincidence, too global to be local events, too deliberate to be chaos. And the marker of this is the genetics of ruling dynasties. They are all sick. They all degenerate. None survive. The first Romanov, the last Romanov. One diagnosis for 300 years. Sophia Alexeyevna, the only one healthy. Taken out of the chamber out of necessity. Attempted to play her game. Removed when the attempt failed. Erased from history. But having left a portrait. A portrait with a crown and erased inscriptions. The last message from those who knew the truth. I don't know the whole truth. No one does. 300 years have passed. There are no witnesses. The documents have been burned. The archives are classified. The official history is written by the victors, but the facts remain. Genealogical trees, architecture, maps, demographic data, portraits, all of this is available. All of this is verifiable. And everywhere, discrepancies, contradictions, impossibilities. The official history asks you to believe the impossible, to believe that a woman gave birth to 20 children and all survived, to believe that buildings were constructed with ceilings twice as high as necessary just for aesthetics, to believe that an empire the size of a continent vanished without a trace, to believe that 300,000 children appeared without parents. You can believe, or you can verify. The following investigation is about where the technologies of the previous civilization went, about buildings that could not have been constructed in the 18th century, about blueprints that appeared before the inventions, about patents that describe the impossible. History is not as textbooks portray it. History is a battlefield, a battle for memory, for the right to say what really happened. And in this battle, those who write books emerge victorious. But we have what they do not: facts, physics, biology, mathematics, logic. These things do not obey orders. They cannot be rewritten by decrees. They cannot be changed by directives. 0 healthy sons out of 16 children. That's a fact. Ceilings are 6 meters for people 1.5 meters tall. That's a fact. Tartaria appears on maps from the 16th century. It exists. On maps from the 17th century, it does not. That's a fact. Textbooks do not answer these questions. Official history avoids them. But the facts tell the truth. A quiet one, a stubborn one, an undeniable one. The dynasty of sick boys tells the truth about how the world is not as it appears, that the past is hidden, that memory has been erased, that we live in a world after a catastrophe, in a world built on ruins, in a world ruled by those who came after, and we are the descendants of those who came, or those who were replaced. We do not know for sure, but we can search, we can ask questions, we can doubt. Subscribe, turn on notifications, share with those who are ready to look beyond the surface, because the truth does not come on its own. One must go after the truth, seek, dig, verify. And when you gather enough facts, the picture will come together. Uncomfortable, frightening, but real. The dynasty of sick boys is not the end. It is the beginning of the journey to understand what really happened 300 years ago, and why the official history still sidesteps these questions.